Thank you, Chairman. It's now 1 o'clock and we are live streaming.
Thank you. Good afternoon and welcome everyone to Brecon Council's Virtual Planning Committee meeting for today, Wednesday the 5th of May 2021. This meeting will be live streamed on the Council's social media channels and will be recorded. Once you join the meeting, please remain on mute, which avoids any unnecessary background noise disturbing the meeting. Controls to mute and unmute are displayed on your screen. At the end of this presentation, I will ask Julie Britton, our Democratic Services Officer, to take the roll call to confirm attendance. Could you please ensure that you unmute your microphone before speaking to confirm your attendance, and then mute your microphone, as no response will assume that a planning committee member is not in the meeting. Each application has an allotted time slot. There may be an occasion when the time runs over, and therefore attendees will remain in the waiting room until such time that application is ready to be heard. If for any reason discussion finishes earlier than the time slot given, the meeting will be paused. I will work through the agenda, inviting the ward member, applicant, etc. to introduce and speak on each item as appropriate. Attendees for each application will be held in the waiting room until such time their application is heard. Ward members in attendance who have registered to speak on an application will be asked to speak last. A speaker will be given a maximum of 3 minutes, or in the case of more than one objector or supporter wishing to speak, up to a maximum of 3 minutes in total will need to be shared. Where an applicant and their agent intend to speak, the 3 minutes is split between the two. Other than when speaking, speakers will remain on mute. If you try to speak when not invited to, you may be required to leave the meeting. I will then check with the Democratic Services Officer in attendance. If there are any members who wish to ask a question, please do so by raising your hand, and please remain on mute until invited to speak. Members with a declaration should indicate this by raising their hand. The Democratic Services Officer in attendance will invite the councillor to unmute and declare their interest to the chairman. This councillor will at the relevant time be removed from the meeting and placed in the virtual waiting room until discussion and voting on that item has completed, after which they will return to the meeting. Once the application has been discussed and all questions answered, the Democratic Service Officer will then invite each councillor to speak in turn. If any member should experience IT issues during the presentation and does not ask for it to be repeated, they will be unable to vote on the application. For each item, all members will need to confirm that they have heard the application in full before the vote is taken. A roll call will be given for each member to cast their vote, either for, against, or abstain. Please can I remind members that they will need to unmute themselves when responding. Julie, could I ask you to take the roll, please?
Thank you, Chairman. Councillor Wilkinson.
Here, Julie.
Councillor Atterwill.
Here.
Councillor Bowes. Councillor Chapman-Allen.
Here.
Councillor Clark.
Here.
Councillor Crane.
Present.
Councillor Dale.
Here.
Councillor Digan.
Here.
Councillor Gilbert.
Here.
Councillor Kybird.
Here.
And Councillor Martin.
Here.
Thank you, Chairman.
Thank you. Before we move on to the agenda, I want to sort of like wrestle number 5 back off that agenda, just to announce to anyone who may be listening in that 2 items have been deferred off this meeting. I want to do it now rather than sit and wait till when those items would have been raised. We have item 3PL 2020-0780, which is at Snetterton, land at Chalk Lane. That item's been deferred. And also 3PL 2021-0032 at Watton, land north of Norwich Road. That item has also been deferred. Okay, so we can just move on to item 1, the minutes, to confirm the minutes of our meeting held on the 12th of April 2021. Could I have a show of hands that you've confirmed those minutes for me, please? Show of hands off all the members.
That's carried, Chairman.
That's fine. Okay, thank you, members. Item 2, apologies and substitutes. Julie, please.
Thank you, Chairman. I have apologies from Councillor Bowes, but I was unable to get a substitute for her.
That's fine. I think Councillor Bowes is actually out and about doing the last minute on her election items today. Item 3, declaration of interest and representations received. I will take them as each item is raised. Chairman's announcements, nothing to announce today. You'll be lucky I'm not even going to tell you how far Christmas is off. Item 5, request to defer, I've already done. Item 6, items of urgent business. Where's Rebecca? Rebecca, do we have any items at all?
None today, thank you, Chairman.
Thank you for that. Item 7, we have our local plan update. I think it might be pretty brief, but I'll hand over to Simon, please. Thank you.
Thank you, Chairman. You're right, it is going to be pretty brief. We have two things I'll just advise members of. The Cabinet on Tuesday, I think it was, agreed the Norfolk Strategic Framework, which is a collaboration document between all the Norfolk authorities, including the County Council, which sets out the issues and topics that are to be addressed through any local plan process. This includes issues around housing, around employment, climate change, and other such issues. If they want any more information on that, then please contact myself or Andy Darcy. The papers can be seen on the website, though, under the relevant Cabinet meeting agenda. The other thing to mention is that we're also undergoing our housing monitoring at the moment in order to advise our next statement in relation to 5-year housing land supply. So if you see planners wandering around counting houses, that's why they're doing it. Thank you, Chairman.
Thank you, Simon. Any questions at all from members? No. Okay, that's fine. Okay, we will now move on to item 8A, which is our deferred applications, or should I say item 8, and to correspond through to item 8A, which is Shibdom, which is Parfit Nurseries, the Cricket Players, Old Post Office Street, reference 3PL 2020-0906. And that is Chris Hobson. Are you ready, Chris? Chris? You're still on mute, Chris. You better sort it out, Chris, otherwise I should have to do a musical interlude.
Apologies, Chairman. I'm just having difficulties with Zoom getting the presentation up. Just bear with me.
That's fine. Okay, carry on.
What can you see on your screen?
Yep, I can see the. Yeah, I can see the presentation.
Yeah, you can see the presentation. Apologies. I thought it was. Yeah, I thought it was not showing. So thank you, Chairman. So you'll see item A is in Shipton. So we're at the site, the former cricketers of Old Post Office Street in Shipton. Proposals are a full consent for the erection of 23 dwellings and associated car parking, access and garages. Now, members may recall this site. There was an application heard 18 months ago for the same scheme, other than changes to highways works and drainage. provision. So I'll run through the proposals just to re-familiarise all members with the proposals in due course. I'll just highlight that we do have some additional comments. So those were received following the supplementary report issued last week. So we've got 3 further letters of objection. So they are from owners of Parkview and Farron Cottage, who sit to the southeast of the site. There's a number of matters raised. So these do include matters in relation to the size of the proposals, impacts on privacy, the prevalence of existing flooding incidents in the area, the inadequate drainage network within the vicinity, and existing flooding aspects relation to that, and also in terms of the proposed road layout. So those are aspects that are reported in the main bulk of the committee report, so I won't go into detail on those. Additional comments do comment on the proposed works themselves, so concern about the number and location of proposed footpath crossings, and the impacts that would have on traffic flows and highway safety. Proposed gateway feature to the south-west of the site, potential issues with visibility, also concerns raised about proposals and any works impacting on accesses to existing properties, also with the impacts of lowered curbs and access to properties via certain vehicles. I'll touch on those in more detail in due course as we go through the presentation. So in terms of the application before you, it is an allocated site within the Bretton local plan, so it's the purple colour here, so that's assessment boundary in red. You see it's on the southeastern corner of the village of Shipton, so it's allocated for 23 dwellings. Other important aspects to note are you can see the conservation area boundary here, and we've got open fields to the south and west. So there's a contextual image. So we've got the site here, residential properties wrap around the north and east, and so they've got fields to the south and west. You can see the Watton Road due southeast of the site, and there's the site boundary again. So the green actually highlights off-site highway improvement works in all these locations and drainage improvements to the south. In terms of the site, say I'll run through the proposals and site again for those members that don't recall the earlier committee. So a relatively flat open site. It was a former nurseries. We can see the site edges there. We've got hedgerows and trees on the northern boundary. That's the site looking back towards Old Post Office Street. We've got some timber fencing. The adjacent property. There's the right of the image is the existing site access. Again, view looking northward, so see the 2-storey properties to the north, and that's due west towards the open fields and hedgerow bordering the site. The existing property here adjacent to the site, we've got the existing access. Proposals would relocate the access in this location, and that's some further images of the site and the structures in relation to the former nursery. So some further buildings there. Obviously reflect the kind of former nursery use of the site. So there is a bit of history here. There was an approval, reference number from 2015, outline consent was granted. And there's an indicative layout. We'll see access in this location as proposed within this application. Now I mentioned the previous refusal 18 months ago. So in terms of the proposals, there we can see concern, you may recall, was in terms of proposed arrangements here. I'll move on and talk about those in more detail in due course. And this is the current proposal, so same arrangement on site. Changes here in terms of the off-site road layout and access. I'm getting a warning about unstable connection, so please advise if there is an issue. I'll continue. So here we are, the proposed layout. So it's a mixture of 2, 3 and 4 bedroom properties. We've got detached and semi-detached. Generally, 2 stories to give you an idea of the proposed house type. So they generally take a traditional kind of aesthetic use of red brick and pan tiles. We've got some elements of render. So these are the detached properties. We've got a bungalow, there's one single story dwelling here. So again, taking the same design approach. We've got further detached properties, and here's the 2-bedroom properties, semi-detached 2 stories. And again, further proposals here for the semi-detached properties. So I touched on some of the issues previously raised. Now, in terms of this application, as I say, the scheme is generally the same in terms of site, but there's been significant changes off-site in terms of the highways works now. In terms of this application, we still have objections raised by the parish council and 40 separate objections raised for various matters. As mentioned, those are addressed in the report. In terms of the parish council, concerns raised in relation to the kind of extent of proposed highways works and pedestrian crossings, for instance, concerns about the kind of over-engineered nature of the off-site works, and issues in terms of the scale of proposals and the lack of community provision in terms of financial contributions. I'll address those in more detail in each topic. In terms of the proposed highways works, the members raised concern when the previous application was considered about those works at 2 junctions. So the old Post Office Street A1075 junction, Junction A, and the Bridgham Road A1075 junction. So that's referred to as Junction B in a moment. The proposals upgrade these and amend those, which we'll move on to. The proposals also include speed restricted zone 20 mph along Old Post Office Street, and additional footways, additional kind of slowing measures along the Watton Road in terms of signage and gateway features. Also relocate bus stops and pedestrian crossings. In terms of the existing layout, here we can see that there. Now the proposals previously, here, one of the key concerns was agricultural vehicles, HGVs, currently use the old Post Office Street, being prevented by this layout. Now, with the current arrangement, the applicants have gone away and instructed a highways consultant to consider the proposals and come up with alternative design, and engage with the local community to look in detail at those issues. So the proposals are now to retain Old Post Office Street in this alignment. However, the priority is with the new site here. Access would be provided for the site here, and agricultural vehicles, HGVs that currently use this route would continue to do so, with the priority here to the estate. So there would be vehicles required to obviously stop here if you look either way. We do have obviously a reduced curb here and here, so that would also act to an element of slowing for vehicles. In terms of the other aspect, so that is Junction A. The Junction B I referred to as the Bridgham Road, Watton Road junction. Come on to that in more detail shortly. So that was the Junction A works in more detail. Here we can see access to these houses here. So we've got a number of cottages, the cottage, Puddle Cottage, Green Gates, Parkview and Fan Cottage. All those accesses would be retained. In terms of the Junction B, so here we can see the existing arrangement. The issue raised particularly at committee was the proposals previously amended this alignment to create a more right-angled approach, so requiring vehicles to turn, and potential conflicts with vehicles along Watton Road as they leave the site onto the Watton Road. So the current proposals now again keep a more straight alignment for particularly HGVs and agricultural traffic to continue as they do at present. We've also got additional footpath improvements, crossings here and here, additional signage. So in terms of those issues raised at committee and within the reasons for refusal, it's considered that the proposals do address those. The Highways Authority have raised no objections. As set out in the report, the proposals are considered to be acceptable from a highways perspective and address those previous reasons for refusal. In terms of some of those later comments from the local community, I'll go back to those particular areas of concern. So one of the concerns was about access here, as mentioned. Residential houses here, properties all have their existing accesses retained. Concerns also raised about the height of drop curbs. Now those would be a standard height, so it would enable all vehicles to access as you would do on a standard private drive or access from an adopted highway. In terms of the gateway feature, we've got an indicative location here. Now that would be, as I say, would be the subject of a 278 agreement with the Highways Authority, and that would be a condition as recommended in the committee report, and we would obviously get some confirmed and specific details from the Highways Authority and the applicants in terms of its exact height and sighting, so that would be addressed via condition. In terms of the numbers of pedestrian crossings, concern raised by the parish council in particular, these aren't controlled, they're simply a reduced curb height, so you just enable those with a wheelchair or with a pram to cross at these points and access to the bus stops on either side. In terms of the proposals, therefore, as I say, there's now a comprehensive scheme of off-site highway improvement works. Say there's enhancements from a highways perspective, and proposals would, as officers set out in the report, would be acceptable from a highways perspective. In terms of other matters, the parish council and local community raised concerns about flood risk and drainage. Now, the proposals have been reviewed at length by the lead local flood authority, and they're satisfied with the revised proposals. They do meet the policy guidance in terms of impacts off-site, but also in terms of sustainable drainage. In terms of the concerns raised by residents at Park View, having discussed those with the lead local flood authority since completing the report, they're satisfied that the drainage ditch network that runs south of the site and discharges south to the Blackwater River is acceptable and suitable to discharge the outfall from the site, which will be restricted to a greenfield runoff rate. In terms of foul drainage, the Anglian Water raised no objections, and there is adequate capacity within the existing network, and the proposals do provide for on-site infrastructure to address that or any existing issues. In terms of viability, now a concern raised by ward members, also the parish council, relates to the potential or perceived lack of contributions. Now, the proposals do provide for contributions to education, library facilities, and in terms of the kind of affordable housing provision, the applicants did submit evidence to demonstrate that the scheme could not provide the full affordable housing provision. Now, that has been reviewed by the council's independent consultants, and they have, whilst they disagree with the applicants' figures and assumptions on that and conclusions, there is now an agreement between the council and the applicants to provide 2 affordable housing. So that's 9% affordable provision, 1 affordable rent unit and one shared ownership. As I say, the housing team, having reviewed this have raised no objections in that regard. In terms of the broader aspects about design and landscape, in terms of the kind of density and layout, it's approximately 23 dwellings per hectare, which is considered to be acceptable. It's not particularly high. It is in terms of density higher than the surrounding area, but in broad terms, it's a relatively low level. We can see the layout there. It provides acceptable levels of outlook, private amenity space, is acceptable in terms of the wider landscape impacts with planting retained to boundaries. In terms of other aspects of the application, in terms of the committee report, within the consultation section, we have received comment from the county ecologist. They have raised an objection subject to conditions, and those are included in the report. We've also since received comments from the Historic Environment Service, and they've raised no objection subject to an archaeological scheme of investigation, and the resolution, as I'll come to, will take into account an additional condition in that regard. And in terms of residential amenity, concerns raised in terms of amenity are noted. However, when considering the overall layout and separation distances, the proposals are considered to be acceptable. Other aspects in terms of the foul pumping station, we have received comments from the environmental health team, and an additional condition is recommended to secure a scheme of measures to prevent any harm by way of noise or odour from that pumping station, which is located here. In terms of other elements of the proposals, as touched on towards the start, it is an allocated site within the local plan. The proposals have been reviewed against the criteria in the housing allocation policy and do comply with those criteria. In terms of housing type and mix, the proposals are considered to be acceptable and meet the policies in the local plan in terms of sizes and type. There are no unacceptable impacts in terms of the proposals. Proposals are considered to comply with the policies in the local plan, and accordingly it's recommended for approval. It's obviously, we've touched on the obligations. Those planning obligations in terms of affordable housing would be a requirement to provide the on-site open space in terms of layout, but also management. The legal agreement would also need to cover the provision of financial contributions towards library facilities and education. So it's recommended approval subject to entering into that legal agreement, but also conditions are set out in the report, plus those two additional conditions, one requested by the Historic Environment Service and one from the Environmental Health Officer, in terms of acoustic and odour attenuation from the pumping station. Thank you, Chairman.
Thank you. I've got Mrs. Langham, who's an objector.
Can I just interrupt very quickly, Chairman? I think.
Sorry,
Chairman, can I just interrupt very quickly?
Yes, please do, Simon.
Yeah, Chris referenced Bridgham Road when actually he should have referenced Bradenham Road. So just for the record, Chairman, thank you.
Yep. Yeah, Bridgham Road near Thetford, so that's obviously not should. But thank you, thanks, Simon. Can we get off this screen because I can't see Mrs. Langham?
Apologies.
Mrs. Langham is there. Oh, Nigel, Chairman.
Yeah, I want main screen if you don't mind.
Julie, can you
That's better.
That's better.
That's
Great.
better.
Yeah.
Okay, I'm looking. Oh, I can see Mrs. Langham. Oh, Mrs. Langham's got the same first name as my wife, but there's no connection. I promise you.
I know.
Mrs. Langham,
You're back.
thank you. You've got 3 minutes, please.
The issues are still the same. The ditch has not been clarified. They're stating they don't know ownership. I do have my title deed here, which clearly states that I own the ditch. The ditch does not connect to the Blackwater River. There is no connection upstream to my ditch at all. The new road sign saying the welcome to Shipton will be placed in a dangerous place because pedestrians will not be able to see when they walk to the allotment along the main road. It will cut visibility for us coming in and out and people coming down. The road plan shows New Blossom Cottage, Junction A, as having a verge. There are no verges around this property. All it has is a boundary which has a preservation order on it. So the only way to get a pavement is to take part of the highway because the owners will not give any of their land. It will make it dangerous. The second one, with regard to the document supplied by Councillor Paul Hewitt, reiterates there is a flooding risk in our area. It happens frequently. The last flood resulted in the Watton Road being closed and a diversion put in place. It will just lead to further congestion, further accidents, and the new layout, change in priority, will make it very dangerous for anything going from Old Post Office Street to Bradnam Road, because suddenly you've got to stop and give way to those in new development.
Okay, thank you very much.
Thank you.
I'll take the other speakers, but Chris, I'll have you come back at the end just to sort out some of these questions that have been raised with regards to a ditch, a sign, and the verge in front of New Blossom Cottage. I'm pretty sure the flooding issues with regards to Watton Road have been sorted because it was further down. I've got Howard Cardus of PSB Services on behalf of the agent, and also we've got David Footer and Tony Valentine here for asking questions only later. So Mr. Cardus, I'm trying to see you on here.
Thank you, Chairman.
Oh,
Here I am.
yeah, 3 minutes, please, sir.
Thank you. Good afternoon, everybody. My name is Howard Cardus. I'm speaking on behalf of the applicants. This updated plan application has focused on all areas that have required reconsideration and the provision of updated information, including drainage design and flood risk appraisals, financial viability appraisals, and highway appraisals. You'll recall committee recommended refusal for one highway reason, previously stating an unacceptable impact on highway safety as a result of the design of the junctions. Committee's reason reflected lots of concerns raised, which we've taken on board regarding the safe movement around this area of Shipton, both existing vehicles and new vehicular movements. The updated highway scheme follows considerable design development work and has included numerous face-to-face consultations with local concerned parties and councillors. Norfolk County Councillors Statutory Highway Consultee have also been consulted thoroughly, but also since December 2019, when we were appointed, we've undertaken considerable design development work to demonstrate an acceptable highway scheme. The key points to note are Old Post Office Street vehicular route will remain accessible for vehicles, particularly large agricultural vehicle operators that use it and wish to continue using it. The new footway extending southward from the new development estate road junction with Watton Road will not include a raised curb, meaning continued vehicular use will be maintained for all those needing to use it. Removal lorries and refuse vehicles will enter the development via this junction without crossing into the opposite lane and facing approaching traffic from Watton Road. The upgraded aforementioned junction B, the Bradnam Road junction with Watton Road, has been investigated further and updated further, as Chris Holson has now identified. It is clear that that excessively sized vehicles, other than a combined harvester or a large tractor trailer combination, can now achieve turning movements from Watton Road into Bradnam Road from the south without crossing into the opposite lane of Wadden Road. We should also submit the highway scheme now proposed will remove the propensity for a majority of road users to reach Bradnam Road via Old Post Office Street. We should also like to comment upon concerns raised regarding the numerous crossings and associated pedestrian provision. For the avoidance of doubt, these crossings are not traffic signal controlled crossings. Vehicle traffic will maintain a priority. They are drop curb locations simply to enable safe and convenient movement of all highway users, wheelchair users, pushchair users and the like. They're very much based on MPPF. I'd like to conclude this contribution by thanking all parties who have taken the time to comment and ask questions of these proposals, not always in the easiest of circumstances. We also thank Chris Hobson and his team and Norfolk County Council to have reached this hopefully agreeable planning proposition. Thank you very much.
Thank you. That was 3 minutes and 2 seconds. You owe me 2 seconds there somewhere in life. We'll get it back somehow. Okay, sorry, I did say Tony Valentine would answer questions. He's not here, so it's only Mr. Footer. If anyone needs questions from Mr. Footer. Chris, are you ready to come back on some of those questions that was raised by Mrs. Langham?
Yeah, thank you, Chairman. Yes, there's a few matters. I touched on them in the presentation. In terms of the ditch network, yes, obviously the comments raised in terms of I suppose the capability of the network south of the site. So the proposals would drain into the existing network and head south. The concerns, are understood. However, the proposals would be attenuated to the existing greenfield runoff rate, so no greater than existing kind of discharge rate. In terms of the network itself, the LFA have looked again at the evidence they have that submitted by the applicants and confirmed that there's nothing there that would indicate that the network can't cope with the wall discharge, the proposed surface water and discharge downstream into the Blackwater River. I think the concerns raised by the adjacent owners concern about the kind of proposals that it would run upstream. Now, all the evidence we have, as I said, from the applicants and the lead local flood authority is that it does drain to the Blackwater River. In terms of the signage, I touched on the gateway feature. Now, again, that would be subject to a condition as commonplace. We would have a Section 278 agreement with the Highways Authority, and that would need to be approved by the Highways Authority, and they would ensure that it's by the location of its siting and design, it wouldn't obstruct visibility along the highway and from those existing accesses. So that would be subject to and addressed by a detailed design and condition. In terms of the accesses to the properties, the proposals wouldn't obstruct or don't propose to prevent any access to existing residential properties. The existing accesses would all be retained.
Did that include the verge in front of New Blossom Cottage within that, please, Chris?
New Blossom Cottage. The verge as shown on the drawings is the highway land. So as I say, the proposals would either retain the verge as existing or being in the highway owned land would provide a footpath with an appropriate drop curb. Again, those kind of level of details would be subject to the Section 278 agreement and a detailed scheme agreed with the Highways Authority.
But I still have a minute outstanding. New Blossom Cottage does not have a verge. It is flush to the highway now. There is no pavement or verge around that property.
Thank you, Mrs. Langham. Chris, can we have the can we have the presentation showing New Blossom Cottage back up, please, just so myself and members are clear where this item is that we're talking about, please.
So bear with me, I'm just trying to find New Blossom Cottage. Bear with me, Chairman.
It is junction A.
Yeah, I'm just, it's not
I think it's
noted there. We've got the cottage, I'm just confirming which cottage it is.
I think it's the other end, nearer to Bradnam Road, possibly.
Yes, it's further up, Chris, on the junction.
Next slide back.
Yeah,
There,
so
somewhere.
yeah, it's just that cottage that your arrow's just about to hover over, just in between the old post street and the new road that's running in. So that one there.
Yeah, this one
Yes.
here. Yeah, no, there's an existing access here. Now, this drawing here, it doesn't go to the level of detail, as I mentioned, to show the full extent of the works and exactly how that off-site arrangement would work. So this is the intention to kind of highlight those key elements of the improvement work. So the changes to the junction here and here, for instance, the footpath network. Now there will be existing accesses here. The green is just essentially to reflect existing highway land. Now it doesn't say or reflect that there would be a change there. So it intimate, the proposals would be subject to a detailed design. And other than, I think you'll see a note here on the drawing which highlights all existing accesses would be retained from the proposals. Now, as I say, this drawing here, it's because of the level of information within this, we've got all the various improvements and notes highlighted.
What I'm referring to, Chris, is the land shown green on the left on Old Post Office Street. That side there. There's no verge along that road at all.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah.
Mr. Langham, is this where the word Old Post is? Because it looks like a very thin strip there.
That whole road where the arrow is going up and down, none of those properties have a verge between their fence and the highway. They're direct onto the highway.
May I speak, Chair?
Yeah, sorry, Chris, I'll hold you there. Can Mr. Cardis, can you come back because you'll be wary of this application?
Thank you, Chairman. Yes, we did inspect the public highway in some detail. As part of our deliberations, we secured a highway boundary plan from Norfolk County Council. Where you're looking at that green section on Old Post Office Street, there is no proposal to change anything along there to what exists at the moment. It's exactly as is. So if there's any perceived discrepancy, it doesn't apply. Thank you.
Okay, so basically there's going to be no pavements put into any of that area. So if anyone came out of the estate, their safe route would be to walk across past the front of the garage towards the village itself and then turn left into Bradnam Road.
That's correct.
Bit round the cup to find the handle, but with a pushchair or a wheelchair or someone slightly infirm, that would be the safer route. Is that right, Mr. Cardis?
Yes.
Thank you. Okay, let's cover that. Okay, can we go back to main screen, please, Julie or Chris? Okay, thank you. It's open to questions from members with regards to everything that's been raised here. Anyone wishing to ask any questions, please? No?
Yeah, Councillor Gilbert has his hand up.
Thank you. Councillor Gilbert, please.
Thank you, Chairman. I'd like to try and sort out some of the details around this drainage strategy, because we are hearing on page 15 is the flood and water management team. It says the sustainable drainage system has not been proposed, and can't understand why SUDS is not incorporated in the site. But looking at the site, I would say that it is a virtual.
Keith, can I just stop you for 1 minute?
Yeah.
Chris Hobson, can you shut your microphone off? David Footer, can you shut your microphone off? And who else? Julie, can you shut yours off? I'll shut mine because there's a lot of feedback. Okay, I do apologise.
So sorry about that. I'll start again. I'd like to ask some questions about the drainage strategy, because there's no SUDS mentioned for this site. And looking at the site, it is, because I can see it, quite flat. So I would have thought any runoff from the site would be negligible because it would infiltrate straight into the ground. But what we're seeing with this development, there's obviously a lot of hard standing, a lot of roofs, driveways, roads where there would be runoff. And the discharge rate, as I understand it, will be a lot more than the present runoff. But also we're hearing that the ditch itself doesn't go anywhere. Now, I'm not happy about putting water into a ditch which doesn't run anywhere. So I think we lost a lot of information which we need to be able to say that this is safe, because I do know a little bit about flooding, as you know, and what causes it and what can be done to prevent it. So I'm not at all happy with the drainage strategy as we've seen it. We need a lot more detail before I'd be happy. Thank you, Chairman.
Thank you, Keith. Well, I don't put it up for questions normally, but Mr. Cardis is here, and I'm sure he'll be able to answer some of your queries. Mr. Cardis, if you could keep it brief.
Thank you, Chairman. There is a SUDS inclusion in the site. There is attenuation, which basically means the majority of the rainwater will be stored in underground tanks and discharged very, very slowly at a greenfield runoff rate into a new ditch. The calculation is based on 1 in 100 year storm plus 40% climate change. That water will be stored on site and released very slowly into ditch network. That's been covered and agreed by the LLFA, as has been the ditch route proposed. Thank you.
Okay, thank you very much. Anyone else wishing to ask questions? Oh, sorry, Rebecca, please.
And just to, for clarification for all members, Chris has done a supplementary report which does report that the LLFA objection is removed and they're happy with the application subject to conditions.
Yeah. Thanks for that, Rebecca.
Sorry,
Chris, yeah.
If there's any further detail I can add on the surface water drainage, because there's a couple of questions there Councillor Gilbert mentioned about the potential for infiltration. That was assessed and it's not suitable for infiltration, so that has resulted in the kind of drainage scheme proposed. So that, as the applicants mentioned, does include on-site attenuation crates, but also the proposals do provide a bioretention element. So that's the new SUDS element. So Councillor Gilbert highlighted the comments of the lead local flood authority, and as Rebecca has said, that there's an updated comment in the supplementary which provides the latest response, and that is and there they've highlighted the amendments. So there is a SUDS feature now in terms of the bioretention, and as also mentioned, because of a hydro break that restricts the discharge rate to a greenfield runoff rate, it wouldn't be any greater flow rate than the equivalent existing on site. And as also mentioned, we have looked at the ditch network off site and discussed that in detail with the lead local flood authority. And as I say, all evidence that the flood authority have and that's submitted by the application indicates that there would be an appropriate ditch network to discharge into.
Okay, thanks, Chris. Any more questions from members at all? No. Okay, thank you. Julie, could I just take a roll call of every member who has heard the presentation and are prepared to go forward for a vote? Mrs. Langham, I'm sorry, I've got I've got members now. You've had your chance. Thank you. Julie, please.
Thank you, Chairman. Am I now taking the vote?
Okay, hang on a sec. Sorry, I'm off and on. I keep flashing as well. Can I have a show of hands from members if you've heard the presentation, you're prepared to go to vote, please? Show of hands.
Yes, that's everybody. Thank you.
That's everyone. Yes, if you could take the vote now, then please. The recommendation from your office is one of approval.
Thank you, Chairman. Councillor Wilkinson.
I'm for the officer's recommendation for approval with comments stated. Thank you.
Councillor Atterwill.
For approval.
Councillor Chapman Allen.
For approval.
Councillor Clark.
For approval.
Councillor Crane.
For.
Councillor Dale.
For approval.
Councillor Digan.
For.
Councillor Gilbert.
For.
Councillor Kybird.
For the recommendation.
And Councillor Martin.
For the recommendation. Now the highways have been resolved. Thank you.
That's
Thank you.
unanimous, Chairman.
Thank you. Okay, this item has been approved by all members. Thank you very much. Thank you. We're going to move on as soon as we can clear. Ready to go to Old Buckingham.
Thank you, Chairman. I'm just going to let the speakers in.
As soon as we can clear, ready to go.
Thank you, Chairman. I'm just going to let the speakers in.
Okay, we've got speakers in now ready for Old Buckingham. Could I ask you all to please go to mute so that we don't get any feedback while presentations are being taken? Mr. Bennett, Met Office, could I ask you to go to mute, please? Thank you. I think that's everyone. Okay. I'll hand over for this to Old Buckingham, 3PL 2021 0091. Over to you, please, Tom.
Thank you, Chairman. Let's get the presentation up. Okay, so the application before you seeks the erection of a 24.46 metre tall radar tower with an associated comms cabin immediately adjacent. The site is situated within the Anglian Water drilling facility on Abbey Road in Old Buckingham. Here we have an aerial photograph showing the site in the context of the immediately surrounding area. So you can see there it's situated within the confines of the existing facility with some other buildings and structures immediately surrounding it. The location plan here with the site or the area of land included within the application site in red there. So you see it will utilise the existing access point to the site and only take up a small portion of the site. So we have another plan here showing the compound view of the development on the left-hand side there. So here are some elevations of the proposed structure. So it looks fairly similar for when viewed from all sides. And a sectional plan of the structure also. We have here a map of the radar coverage that will be provided by the radar on site.
And we have some site photos here. The crane you can see in each of the photos gives an indication as to the height of the tower when viewed from each of these vantage points. And for members' reference, here we have a tower that has been erected elsewhere in the country, just to give an indication as to how it will actually look in person, as I appreciate that the plans perhaps make it a bit difficult to visualise what the structure would actually look like. And we have some other visualizations here, primarily thinking about the visual impact of the proposed structure when viewed from Waterworks House, which is immediately adjacent to the site, approximately a distance of 30 to 40 metres from the neighbouring property to the siting of the tower. So in terms of the key issues of the application, the key issues raised really from representations are to do with the ecology impact, noise impact, and visual impact of the development. Members will see from their report that the visual impact has been assessed and has been supported by a visual impact assessment submitted by the agent. We consider on balance that the visual impact of the development is acceptable and would comply with local planning and local and national planning policy in that regard. Regarding the ecological impact, having particular regard to the impact on bats and barbastelle bats in particular, the application has been supported by an ecology survey and submission of additional information subsequently relating specifically to the impact on bats. This has been considered by the county ecologist and Natural England. They have confirmed that they have no objections and that they do not feel that the development will result in a detrimental impact on these protected species, primarily due to the poor roosting and foraging qualities of the site and surrounding area, and the presence of more appropriate locations in the surrounding area that would be more likely to be inhabited by the bats. Additionally, in relation to the noise impact that's been referenced in a lot of representations, it was noted at the time of the site visit that the existing Anglian water site does generate quite a significant level of noise on a fairly constant basis during operation hours, and therefore it's not considered that any additional noise that could potentially be generated by this tower would be above and beyond this, and that's a view that is supported by the environmental health officer, who has raised no objections to the development in terms of the noise impact on the neighbouring properties. Just as an additional point, there are some additional conditions that were unfortunately missed off of the report when submitted for the agenda. These relate to a construction a traffic management plan, and additionally a aircraft warning lights and a maximum height condition, just to basically ensure that the tower does not impact detrimentally on the airfield adjacent to the site as well. So all in all, we're satisfied that the proposal is compliant with local and national planning policy. We have no statutory objections, and we are accordingly recommending approval subject to conditions. Thank you, Chairman.
Thank you. I've got Andy Nichols, please, who's representing the Parish Council. 3 minutes, please, sir.
Mr. Chairman, members of the Planning Committee, I'm here today to ask you to consider the application based on the impact to the neighbours of this unusually large structure. It may well have ticked many boxes in planning policy. However, the communication from the applicant during the process has been its best patchy and quite strategic, and some of my parishioners suggest cynical. They mention an educational benefit for schools, but no children will be allowed onto an Anglian water working site. It's our priority as parish councillors to help protect our residents. This 80-foot structure brings no benefits to our village at all. No extra employment, no community benefit. In fact, it threatens our ecology, landscape and tourism. Since the plan was first mooted, Mrs. Ritchie's, who lives at Waterworks House next to the Anglian Water Depot, has had not a proper night's sleep because she has been so distraught with worry. Public Health England says the electromagnetic microwave radiation continuously emitted from this site will not harm you unless very close. It cannot be very good for you either. Given the choice, adjacent neighbours would not choose to live so close to such a source of radiation. I'm sure none of you would either. Abbey Road has 3 schools, a cafe, 2 museums, bed and breakfast business, 2 historic buildings, and a renowned air show. This location makes no sense. Every other one in England is on remote moorland or on MOD land. All 14 that are in place are not situated near houses or villages. Matt Wilkins, the manager of the next door airfield, described it as completely nuts. This tower and the airfield's takeoff and landing corridor is within 19 centimetres of required clearance. 90 centimetres is a very small margin for error. Back in 2012, Breckland refused permission for 2 14-metre wind turbines on the next door field on air safety. How can a tower twice the height be therefore safe? Please, can you consider some consistency? In the design and access statement, the Met Office has identified 4 other sites. It should be noted that the latter 2 sites already have tall structures. The application has not demonstrated that it cannot be reasonably located on alternative sites and would result in less or no harm. Mrs. Ritchie's, the adjacent neighbour, has not been offered significant screen, and what could screen such a height? And no condition has been added to ensure the screening, and neither has a proper visual assessment been carried out from their property. I have been present at previous planning committees, Mr. Chairman, when you have asked to vote with your hearts rather than your heads. I urge you to consider that thought again. This is not a plea for more housing to help Breckland meet a housing shortage. Neither is a renewable project to help fulfil a climate emergency aspirations. It's a colossal structure that's impact will devastate its neighbours. This is a case of not in my backyard to Mrs. Ritchie's. If you approve this, they will no longer have a backyard. I urge you not to be the first planning committee to approve such a structure in a village. To be right beside someone's forever home they have put all their life's work and savings into. If passed, their property will be blighted. We as a parish look to do what we consider right. Please, as a district, look into your hearts as well as the logic in your heads. There are more appropriate sites that Mr. George Freeman MP has offered to help find and already identified during the applicant's process. If you grant nothing else today, please grant Mr. and Mrs. Ritchie's a proper night's sleep for the first time in a long, long while. The Met Office are a Goliath. Please don't feel you can't support David. Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Thank you, Mr. Nichols. Thank you. Thank you very much. Thank you. I've got now Alison Gilmore and Oliver Chubbuck, and you've got 2 minutes each. Alison, would you like to go first?
Good afternoon. Firstly, I'd like to say what has already been pointed out in an article in the EDP, that this is an absolutely absurd location for a radar installation this side, towering over a family home, next to a busy airfield, between a historic hall and a listed priory, in a popular tourist spot, and home to critically endangered bats. Clearly, because it is a cheap and easy option for the Met Office to use an Anglian water site, which enjoys the benefits of permitted development, they haven't seriously considered other better locations. I think this application breaches at least 6 of Breckland's policies and should be refused. Firstly, protection of amenity. How can it be morally acceptable for an 80-foot tower, which buzzes constantly, be built next to a family home? Mr. Donnelly says the Anglian water site makes a noise at the moment, but it doesn't. This tower will loom over the house and garden, and the continuous buzz will make spending time outside utterly miserable. It's inhuman and just plain wrong. This will be the closest weather radar to any residential home or indeed any runway in the UK. 40 metres from the Ritchies and 342 metres from the runway. As the airfield manager pointed out, building so close to a busy airfield would undoubtedly increase the risk of accident. There is enormous local strength of feeling against the tower. A petition in our village raised over 250 signatures very quickly. Secondly, the council's policy of biodiversity protection. Old Buckingham is home to critically endangered western Barbastelle bats. We have bats roosting next door, some of the very last few left in the world. Radiation from the tower will affect the bats' foraging area and push this red-listed mammal closer to extinction. Would Breckland be proud of this? According to Natural England's standing advice, there should have been a proper bat survey done between May and September last year, and this omission could be grounds for appeal. The Habitats Directive states it's essential to establish the presence or otherwise of a protected species and the extent they may be affected by the development. Residents plan to get an independent survey done. But we need to walk warm nights to record the bats, and this planning application is being pushed through before this is possible. The planning officer proposes mitigation measures, but the only effective mitigation would be building the tower elsewhere, such as RAF Neatsted, where a military radar tower already exists and bats would not be affected. Because it's not a designated site, the lack of comment from Natural England doesn't imply there are no impacts on the natural environment. It is for you to determine whether this is consistent with national local policies. It is not. Other policies breached include ENV 7 and 8 and COM 2 covered by Mr Nichols, but protection of the landscape. The erection of this dominant white golf ball top tower would not be in accordance with the council's own strict landscape policies. I would urge the planning committee to follow its own policies, do the right thing and vote against this application. Thank you, Mr Chairman.
Thank you, Mr Chubbuck. I do apologise. I was unaware that Mr Bennett wasn't here. I do apologise for.
Sorry, Chairman. Oliver's Mr Chubbuck has now appeared in the waiting room. Should I let him in?
Yes, might as well.
Shall I just finish the little bit that I didn't say or not?
Well, no, hold on. I'm just wondering whether Mr Chubbuck would like to have, say, a minute to just blast through something he feels might need to be raised. I'm very wary of timing and fairness. I'm going to extend Mr Trice and Mr Bennett's time to have at least 2 minutes each if they require it.
I think Ollie gave his minute to me, and so.
Well, would you want to do it then?
Okay, well, I was just going to say that this huge, imposing, incongruous white golf ball will be highly visible against the flat agricultural landscape, and it will destroy the character of this beautiful area and quiet country lane, which is more greenfield than brownfield, except for the tiny parcel of Anglian water property. So I don't think you can consider it a benefit that it's on a brownfield site, because the whole area isn't really brownfield site. It's beautiful. Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Oh, thank you. Okay, thank you very much.
Chairman, I think you've frozen. As Nigel, as the chairman we've lost the chairman. Maybe the vice chairman can take over the application, please.
Yes, thank you, Julie. I think that, is there any more public speakers before can somebody take over that list for me then, please?
Vice Chairman, the Councillor Stephen Askew, the ward rep, is here to speak.
Okay.
And also we have Jim Trice and Richard Bennett, the applicants, who are also in attendance to speak.
I think the chairman's back as well, Julie.
Thank you.
Chairman's back.
I'm back here now. Everyone went blank. I was talking to myself for about 2 minutes and no one was moving. I thought we were playing statues. Sorry, Mr. Trice, 2 minutes, off you go.
Thank you very much. I'm Jim Trice. I'm the lead for this project at the Met Office. Thank you for the opportunity to speak about this proposal, which represents a significant investment by the Met Office and the Environment Agency, which would benefit people across the whole of East Anglia. The main justification for this development is that more accurate rainfall information from the radar can prevent flooding by giving the Environment Agency and other responders time to prepare flood barriers or manage water courses. And where flooding can't be prevented, better flood warnings can give people critical extra time so that their families and possessions are kept safe, giving businesses more time to move stock or expensive equipment, and farmers time to move livestock. Just a few extra hours warning can make a massive difference to businesses and then the time needed to recover from a flood. Anglian Water will also use the improved data to help balance the sewage system, helping prevent outflow into the sea, protecting bathing water quality and protecting the environment. And data would also be used to aid regional aviation and also in our weather modelling to improve forecasts for all of the United Kingdom, including for severe winter weather like we saw with the beast from the east in 2018, which affected all of the country, but in particular East Anglia. So although the project is of national significance, it's mainly about providing benefits to the people of East Anglia in terms of flood warnings, improved flood warnings and responding to floods. In terms for safety that's been raised, I'd like to say that the radar is a fundamentally safe machine, and Public Health England have confirmed that. The radar works by sending out a pulse of electromagnetic radiation, but it's above the horizontal. So with the tower height, the beam is well focused, and Public Health England have verified by taking readings at an identical radar that radiation levels at the surface are minuscule. In fact, they're less than 1,000% of the actual levels anybody would be working on. The airfield's been mentioned. We have worked with Old Buckingham Airfield throughout this process, and as you'll see, we've reduced the height of the tower by 4 meters to come in underneath the safety zone that the airfield were concerned about. So it's brought the tower height down by 15%. Okay, thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Trice. Thank you. Can I hand over to Mr. Bennett, please, of the Met Office? 2 minutes, sir.
So just to go through some of the other side of things. So public engagement, as detailed within the application, we made great efforts to engage with the local community, including a public information event at the village hall, a leaflet drop of the Old Buckingham and surrounding parishes, posters, websites, links, and Facebook postings. In addition to attendance at the parish council meetings and regular email updates to the parish council, information has been provided for the village newsletter and personal correspondence with local residents. Highways departments have no objection to the application. And from an ecology point of view, an independent Norfolk-based ecology organisation has confirmed that the proposed site does not provide a particularly valuable foraging resource or provide suitable roosting sites, so has no significant attractions to the Barbastell bats. Barbastells are typically woodland bats, widespread and relatively common within Norfolk, and might use this location for only a very occasional foraging. Furthermore, the ecologist from Norfolk County Council the Natural Environment team has reviewed the report and is in agreement with the findings. Specifically, the ecologist has said that they are satisfied with the timing of the site visits made by our ecologists from Wild Frontier, and that this would give an accurate representation of the roosting and foraging capabilities for the site. I would like to pick up on something someone mentioned before about schools, physics, etc. That's never something that we discussed in terms of at site. What we do is look to work with the local sixth form colleges from an engineering perspective to help them understand how, in terms of environmentally friendly engineering policies, can be pursued in the future. So it would just be worth maybe if I could just make a note of that, please. And finally, on visual impact, our submitted visual impact assessment and independent findings by Historic England have been assessed for the application and judged that the visual impact of the radar installation would be in the lower range of less than substantial harm. Furthermore, the aviation warning light is required only during daytime operations, so will not contribute to any light pollution at night for the neighbours. And that really sums up what I was hoping to say. We're happy to take questions as and when, both myself and Mr. Trice from the project.
Thank you very much. Thank you. We go over to Councillor Askew, please. 3 minutes, sir.
Right, thank you. Good afternoon, members. As the local ward member, I have a duty to view applications such as this objectively from all sides. This application has been a difficult one for me to assess. On the one hand, I don't want to stand in the way of progress for the future greater good. And on the other, I am charged with a responsibility to work to protect and improve conditions for the local environment and its people while I am an elected representative. And while I don't doubt the importance of such installations to provide better data to improve weather forecasting and bring the eastern counties on a par with other areas of the country, it is essential that no stone is unturned to achieve the correct siting of such. A 4 metre square, 24 metre high structure will have a major impact on the skyline in isolation, and once erected, it will likely be in situ for many years. It is no secret that the Met Office have these types of installations at a number of water authority properties throughout the country. There is one main difference to this application than the others, which is the proximity of residential housing. Members who attended the site meeting will be aware that a residential property, which was once part of the Anglian Water Drilling Unit site, is a mere stone's throw away from the proposed tower. Abbey Road is so named because of Old Buckenham Priory, an Augustinian priory built on the site of Old Buckenham Castle, which dates back to the reign of King Henry I in the mid-1100s. This significant historical property is barely a quarter to half a mile from the application site. It would be irresponsible as temporary custodians of this beautiful area to give such little credence to the parish's history when determining a major application. Between the application site and the priory are further residential properties, including a farm, which will be subject to the vast visual impact that a structure of this magnitude brings. A previous application was withdrawn when it was found the installation would have a safety issue on the adjacent Old Buckenham airfield. The airfield offered to find an alternative site on their grounds, which wouldn't have an impact on aircraft safety, was away from the residential housing, and would have minimal visual or audible impact. This was dismissed as unsuitable with no real meaningful explanation. Others have mentioned the environmental concerns to wildlife, and none have questioned the importance of such installations. It is my belief, despite the necessity for modern weather radar such as this, that the Met Office have been disingenuous with their methods and have paid scant regard to the detrimental impact to residents and the historical significance this installation would have. With a potential alternative site muted, I would urge the applicant to meaningfully assess this or seek an alternative site, which wouldn't be of such detriment to the locality and its residents. Thank you for your time.
Thank you very much. Thank you. It's now open to questions from members. Do members have any questions they wish to raise on this issue? Councillor Wilkinson, please.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Mrs. Gilmore and Mr. Nichols kept referring to the tower as 80 feet. Obviously, we heard it is below 25 feet. And I did, on the site visit, note a tower across the field nearly opposite this site, which is quite high. Can I ask the officer, please, did we have a formal objection from the manager at the airfield? Was ever contact made with him?
Thank you, Chairman. So no formal comment has been made. Attempts were made to contact the manager of the airfield to get a formal response on this, but with no success, unfortunately.
So that sounds it's not significant to the management of the airfield. Okay, thank you. No more questions. Thank you.
Rebecca, please.
Just for the record, members, the height of the tower is below 24.5 metres. I think Councillor Wilkinson just mentioned feet again there, so it's 24.5 metres. Thank you.
Okay, thank you. Any other questions from members? No.
Oh,
sorry, I didn't see your little yellow hand up. Thank you.
Thank you, Chairman. I have a number of questions, if I may, regarding this. So I'll start off with the easy ones first. Perhaps chaps Met Office can answer them for me. The colour of this tower, this white golf ball, does it have to be white, or can it be more, something that'll blend in better with the skyline? That's my first question. Could I have an answer to that, please?
Mr. Bennett?
Yeah.
Or Mr. Trice?
I'll be happy to take that one. The colour of the lattice tower can be anything or you like. The colour of the radome on the top needs to be white. Putting a colorant into that material would affect the way the electromagnetic field passes through it and back. So we're not able to colour the radome at the top, but the tower can be coloured, yes.
Okay, next question, thank you. It was mentioned that I think in the officer's report that there would not be significant noise from this during the day because there's noise from the Anglian Water site. What noise does this thing emit in the evening when the Anglian Water site isn't used?
Yeah, so the radar is fundamentally quite a quiet machine. It doesn't have any fast moving parts. The maximum speed that it turns around is actually 4 revolutions per minute, so it is very quiet. It wouldn't be heard during the day over the noise of a normal industrial site like the Anglian Water site, or any traffic, or even trees rustling in the breeze. So the acoustic assessment that was carried out really concentrated on a worst case scenario where we've got very still conditions overnight. And it still concluded that the extra noise on top of the ambient background noise would be less than the 3 decibels stipulated by the condition for that site. So it's still very quiet.
Okay, thank you. Coming to the airfield, does this tower emit any signals that would affect aircraft navigation?
No, it doesn't. No, the transmission frequencies of the weather radar are controlled by Ofcom, so we've got a very narrow band of frequency that we're permitted to transmit within, and that deconflicts with all other types of radio communications and in particular aircraft communications. A lot of these type of radars are used at or near airports, so there's certainly no conflict between air traffic and weather radars.
Okay, thank you. Right, I'd like to come on to the Barbastell bats, please. And I've got quite a bit to say on the bats, having read the ecology report. I would just like to come to the comments from Natural England, because much was made in the officer's report that I think you said, Tom, Natural England have got no objections. What Natural England actually say in their email of the 23rd of April, it says Natural England has not assessed this application for impacts on protected species. It is for the local planning authority to determine whether or not this application is consistent with national and local policies on the natural environment. We advise local planning authorities to obtain specialist ecological determining the environmental impacts of development. So I'll come on to a few points on the bats. The survey work for bats should be carried out between May and September. This survey was carried out, I believe, it was just basically, it was a site visit from what I can make out. It was carried out in December. Well, the bats will be hibernating in December because that's what they do. So I'm not convinced that December is the proper time to carry out any kind of survey work on the bats. So to me, that set alarm bells ringing when I read the ecology report. The next thing I want to ask on this ecology report is, and forgive me, I have to declare a little bit of interest in bats because I helped carry out some conservation work in churches for bats. So I phoned a friend, an eminent expert in Barbastell bats, and I was quite interested in what I heard back. So I'd like to know, was a data search with the local record centre, which is at the Norfolk Biodiversity Information Service, was that carried out was that information thrown up that was in those records? Somebody should have done that. It cost about £100 to get that search done. I'm guessing no. So let me tell you what I think is in it. There are Barbastells at Quiddenham, probably a maternity colony. Eccles Heath, there are Barbastells, a hibernation spot. Kenning Hall, there's a hibernation spot, and a confirmed maternity colony at Ashwellthorpe Woods. This wasn't noted in the ecology report. Now, the Barbastells have a core sustenance zone, which is around about 6 kilometres. So some of these sites are slightly outside the 6 kilometre zone, but they have substantially larger home ranges than that, which is reasonable to say this is a pretty good area for Barbastells, and they warrant consideration with this application. The hedgerows provide good commuting routes for the bats, so that's quite an important thing to take on board. The way to address this would have been to have the ecologist put up some static detectors at the site and along the hedge line to see what they record. That's called an activity survey, which should be, and now we're now coming into May, so this is optimum time, should show high, medium, low bat activity and whether the Barbastells commute through this area. I would just also say it is a protected species. So we've got to be careful as a local planning authority that we have due diligence and we make sure that we are satisfied, because I don't see any expert opinion in here of any survey work actually being carried out, just somebody's opinion of what they think the landscape holds. And I'll read this. It could only constitute an infringement of the regulations if the disturbance was to impair the ability to breed or reproduce or rear or nurture their young, and this is the important bit, or to affect significantly the local distribution or abundance of the species. So I'm not satisfied that we've got enough evidence on the Barbastell bats. I'm not satisfied with the condition that's been put on offer in the officer's report, because that still does not say we're actually going to carry out the active surveys for the bats. It's a protected species, and we as a local planning authority have got a duty to make sure that we are doing our bit to protect them. So I don't think we've got that information at the moment.
Okay, thank you. Can I hold you there? Can I, Rebecca, can you answer this, please?
Yeah, so members, you will be fully aware that we employ statutory consultees in this regard to give us specialist advice when Natural England refer to their statutory guidance. And in this regard, we employ Northamptonshire County ecologists to give us that specialist advice. Northamptonshire County ecologists have reviewed the proposals, and you'll note from your supplementary report that they provided us with additional information with regards to the concerns over the survey work. So in your supplementary report, you'll note that the ecologists refer to a survey undertaken in April 2019 as part of a wider survey relating to the Anglia Water borehole product, and resurveyed the site in December 2020. The site visit was to assess the value of the site for roosting, commuting and foraging bats. No targeted bat surveys were undertaken, and therefore there are no timing restrictions. The ecologists did not recommend further targeted bat activity surveys, and they have justified why further surveys are not required, including that the site contains no potential bat roosting features, that the local arable landscape is not particularly valuable for foraging resource 2, and there are multiple alternative boundaries around the site which could also be used for foraging purposes. We, your statutory consultees that you pay to provide advice to this committee, have said we are satisfied with the timing of the site visits and that this would give an accurate representation of the roosting and foraging capabilities of the site. The additional information provided by the applicants provides additional information which highlights the low value of the local arable landscape for Barbastells, and that the area is not particularly valuable for foraging resource, and there are no significant attractions for foraging bats when compared to the arable countryside elsewhere in East Anglia. With regards to the data search, it's to do with the scale of the operations. So it's not required because it's a small scale operation. It doesn't meet the need for the data search. Your statutory consultees in this regard have accepted that as in their proposal and have provided you the advice in front of you, members, and they are your statutory consultees where you take your advice with regards to ecology. Thanks very much, Chairman.
Thank you. Before you go, Rebecca, just to clarify, at the beginning of your presentation just then, you said Northamptonshire. I gather you meant Norfolk.
Yeah. How many years have been out in Northamptonshire? I do mean Norfolk, apologies.
Sorry, okay. I'll take Councillor Attawell back and then Councillor Gilbert. Councillor Attawell, please.
Thank you, Chairman. The trouble is, I hear what you're saying, Rebecca, but nobody's actually done the evidential work on site. All they've done is a desk study. They've come down, they looked at the lie of the land and said, no, I don't think so. It's a bit like me, when my children were little, I used to tell them to believe in the tooth fairy. The trouble was I couldn't back that up with facts. And when they got older, you get to a stage where you're on shaky ground because you've got no evidence to back up your assertion that the tooth fairy exists. So I'd like to say again, with all due respect, we don't have that evidence. For the sake of £100, nobody seems to have done the local record search, and we haven't done an activity survey on the site. And that would be very simple to organise right now in May. Take a breath, maybe defer this for a month, get that survey work done where they can put some active survey in the field just to make sure that there isn't a problem with the Barbastell bat. And I think we've got a duty to make sure we do that. We need to get better at this stuff. Our own climate and sustainability policies tell us that we need to be strengthened up on the ecology stuff. So again, I don't think we can say we've done enough work and we've got enough evidence in this regard. Thank you.
Thank you. Councillor Gilbert.
Thank you, Chairman. A couple of questions on one of the reports. One of is about noise. Now, I understand that this dome or something inside it rotates. Now, my recollection of physics when I studied at school was that when things go round and rotate on things, noise is emitted. So I'm wondering what sort of noise is emitted. Now, this is not just now and again or during the daytime. This will obviously be a constant noise, and it's all very well to say it might be so many decibels, which to me means nothing. If it was in a city, you wouldn't hear it, but if it's in the middle of the countryside where everything is quiet, you may well do. And so I'd like some information on what sort of noise and how you can relate to that in real terms rather than just say it's so many decibels. And the other question is on the financial aspect of this. I understand that the Met Office, along with everybody else, has to find the most financially suitable solution. And obviously this sort of installation is very much required. But what I would ask is one of the considerations in the siting of this a financial consideration, and it would be a lot cheaper to put it on an Anglian water site than it would be in the middle of or the edge of a farmer's field somewhere. So there's two questions, one on what the noise is and the financial considerations. Thank you.
Rebecca, please.
Oh, sorry.
Just one sec, Mr. Trice. I'll just take Rebecca first, if you don't mind. Rebecca.
I'll let you do the noise then, Mr. Trice. Just to say, members, that in the applicant's submission of information, they have covered off the elements of the advantages of sharing these types of facilities. And those include the existing radar network, the use of previously developed sites, the existing land use, which is comparable with the radar, which is compatible with the radar infrastructure, the availability of service and utilities. There is obviously on this site existing accesses, the secure locations and the longevity of those connections, and the Environment Agency and water authorities share a requirement for the weather radar data, and it's a mutual interest in terms of ensuring good radar coverage. So the applicants have covered the reasons for co-locating off in their report. There's no mention of the financial advantages, and that is not a material consideration to take into consideration today. Mr. Trice, I'm happy for you to cover the noise if you are.
Yes, yeah, thank you. So you're right that the radar rotates, but it rotates very slowly. Its maximum rotation speed is 4 revolutions per minute. So there isn't a fundamentally noisy machine in there. I'd describe the noise of the radar as a low hum, which if there is any other ambient noise around, it won't be heard. And even the rustling of trees in the wind would really prevent the radar being heard at any distance away, including at Waterworks House. So I think that was the conclusion of the acoustic report, in that overnight it may be heard under still conditions at the next door property, but certainly not loudly.
Okay, thank you. Any other further? Oh, sorry, Councillor Chapman-Allen, please.
Thank you, Chairman. Tom, when this application first came out, I got in touch with you asking what other sites had been looked at, and I gave a list of possible RAF sites. And it was quite some time before I got that information back, which was very helpful, because there was a report done by Hickman & Smith Architects, which gave lots of answers to lots of the questions that I wanted. But I think that all members should have received this information, because it was very important. Can you tell me why they didn't?
That report formed part of the design and access statement submitted with the application, therefore was published on the planning or the Brecon Council website under the application documents, and that would have been available from the receipt of the application.
Oh, well, obviously I didn't look thoroughly enough, Tom. And Chairman, I've got questions, please, for, I think probably to Richard Bennett. He can redirect them if I'm not correct in putting them to him. Mr. Bennett, there are 16 sites on the report by Hickman & Smith. 9 of these are Anglia water sites. Could you explain why?
Is that one for you, Jim, in terms of site selection? I know that's an area that you specialised in.
Yeah, that's fine. Yeah, so as well as the design and access statement, we did put a supplementary report into the documentation, which describes the whole of the site selection process. So we took quite considerable lengths to try and find the best site for this radar, and the process actually took almost 2 years. We started off by talking to our existing partners that we've got for weather radar siting, and that's Anglian Water, the Environment Agency and the MOD. And we also looked for additional partners through the Association of Drainage Boards, and actually one of the sites that we shortlisted, Sparham Hill, was actually owned by a local private landowner. So we weren't determined to work with Anglian Water solely, and we were open to either renting or buying sites. So we looked very broadly to start with, and that's where we got the list of 16 sites to start with. After a desk-based study, then we shortlisted them down to 5 sites, which our colleagues visited all of those sites to get a much better idea of suitability of the risks involved with them, the long-term longevity of the land of the site itself and what the surrounding land would be used for, because that's really important to us as well. We anticipate the radar will be in operation for at least 25 years, so we need some guarantees, some assurance that our investment is going to be safe for that period of time.
Yeah,
Sorry, does that answer the question at all?
Well, it does partially, but of those, there were 3 RAF sites on it, 2 of them being RAF Honington and Marham. So to suggest, Honington is the home of the RAF regiment, suggest that Marham may not be viable for 25 years. Well, heaven help us, if RAF Marham, the biggest fighter base we have in the UK, isn't in use in 25 years' time. But it also says on the report, which I would have, as I said, I think it would have been so helpful for members to have had it. As Tom said, it's somewhere lurking in the depths of the planning.
I have Rebecca in now, please. Sorry, Councillor. Can I have Rebecca, please?
Yeah, just to say, members, that, you know, an analyst of site selection is important in ensuring that, you know, the wider area has been looked at, but your job today is to consider the application in front of you and the merits of the application in front of you in accordance with your adopted planning policy. And therefore, you know, there may be other better sites in your view for this to be located, but in terms of your consideration today, it's whether this site is acceptable in accordance with planning policy.
Thank you, Rebecca. Thank you, Chairman. I refer, as I said, back to Hickman-Smith Architects report, where the methodology and the scoring is done. And that's what I'm challenging, that why they are saying that RAF Honington has got a building that might impact on the radar. I know Honington very well. I can't think of a monstrosity building that would impact on it, nor trees. So I'm sorry, Rebecca, I am questioning the methodology on this. And as far as community involvement is concerned, which is in this report, when this application first came out in 2019, yes, there was a public meeting. But with this application, and because of COVID, there has been no public meeting. There's been a Zoom meeting at the parish council, which certainly has not given the public a chance to have their concerns raised or heard or put to bed. So, Chairman, given the information report done by Hickman-Smith on behalf of the Met Office that I received from officers, but other members didn't, there's been no public consultation since the first application came in 2019. There's been no meeting for residents, and I would ask that this application be deferred so that public meeting can be held when COVID restrictions are lifted. And Chairman, I would move that this application is deferred.
Okay, thank you. If I can have Rebecca Collins, please, and Mr. Nichols, could I ask you can put your hand down, because I'm not going to come to you because you've had your moment. It would only be up to a member if they wished to ask you a question. Rebecca, please.
Thank you, Chairman. Just to say, with regards to the community consultation, although we obviously encourage applicants to do as much community consultation before an application as they can, and we like to support them with that, it's not a necessity for determining a planning application. Your necessity is the public consultation that's undertaken in advance of the application and with the planning application. We have undertaken a public consultation, as you'll see from the report, and a number of representations have been received, including from the town and parish councils. And that is your consideration today, that the material considerations raised in that public consultation, it is not a reason to defer a planning application or not determine an application on the grounds that no pre-consultation or an unacceptable pre-consultation. And I note the concerns of Councillor Chapman-Allen, but that is not a reason not to determine the application today.
Thank you. I've got Councillor Wilkinson, and then I have got a recommendation from the floor. Councillor Wilkinson, please.
Yeah, thank you, Mr. Chairman. I'd just like to ask Jim Trice what Met Office staff would be on site, and how often would they be on site to monitor conditions and possibly the concerns the resident has.
Okay, there'll be no permanent staff on site, but the radar has a maintenance schedule, so there would be visits it's a quarterly maintenance schedule generally, but there are more frequent visits, roughly every couple of months, to check up on the operation of the radar. A lot of it can be monitored remotely nowadays. We've got obviously an internet link through to the radar, so we can check on the operation of it remotely. But there's quarterly visits for routine maintenance, like changing the oil and the bearings, that sort of thing, and then occasional visits, slightly more frequent than that. But generally, it runs reliably by itself without maintenance.
Okay, thank you very much.
Thank you. I've got Councillor Attwell, if it's brief, please.
Thank you, Chairman. Could I just ask Mr. Nichols about this public consultation that Mrs. Chapman-Allen was asking about a second ago? Was there any initial sort of consultation prior to the application going in with the parish?
The first time round, the first time round, yes, but not on the next application. What really is interesting, which nobody seems to have just elaborated on, the reason this sequential test or whatever was given out to find a suitable site, if Old Buckingham was mooted in that report, Rebecca kindly mentioned that it was due to the height of Old Buckingham. It seems really, really strange to us that the second recommendation came into us as a parish council with the height reduced by 4 meters, yet it was still the most acceptable site. How can something that is based as a radar suddenly be a quarter of its height in its initial application and still be the most beneficial site? It makes no sense whatsoever, and I don't think that's been picked up during this conversation. So I would just like to mention that as well. Thank you.
Okay, thank you very much. Thank you. I've had a recommendation from the floor from Councillor Chapman-Allen that this item is deferred. I would first of all need a seconder for that, to defer this item. Okay, we've got a seconder from Councillor Attwell. So coming from the floor then, the recommendation to defer this item, and I will follow on from that for the reasons for the deferment. But I think if you've been following it closely, you'll understand them. So could I have a show of hands that we defer this item, please? And that's 4, and those against? 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. That's 5. Okay, I think we lost someone there. I thought we had 10 people. Oh, I think we've lost Councillor Dale. Councillor Dale. So that's 5-4. So that's lost. So this item is on for today, not to be deferred. So any further questions before I move on, please? No? Okay, thank you. Can I have a show of hands that you've all understood what's been happening and are ready to go to the vote, please?
All hands up, Chairman.
All hands up. Okay. Well, on this item for Old Buckingham, which is 3PL 2021-0091, your officer's recommendation on this is one of approval. Can I show of hands, please?
Chairman, I'll do a roll call.
Oh, yeah, sorry, roll call. You've all understood it. A show of hands, you've all understood it, please. Show of hands. Councillor Gilbert, have you listened and understood? Thank you. Okay, sorry. Can you take the roll call, please, for recommendation of approval?
Thank you, Chairman. Councillor Wilkinson.
4.
Councillor Attwell.
Against.
Councillor Chapman-Allen.
Against.
Councillor Clark.
Against.
Councillor Crane.
Against.
Councillor Dale has definitely left the meeting. So Councillor Digan.
4.
Councillor Gilbert.
Against.
Councillor Kybird.
4.
And Councillor Martin.
4.
That's 4 votes for approval and 5 votes against.
Okay, thank you very much. This item has been refused by the committee.
Councillor Attwell has his hand up, sorry.
Yeah, I know. I'll go to Rebecca first, please, and then Councillor Attwell.
Just need reasons, material planning reasons from the floor, Chairman.
Oh, okay, yes, thanks. I need your reasons for refusal, please, and then I'll take Councillor Attwell. Or were you going to give reasons?
Chairman, I'll let Councillor Attwell go first.
Yes, I was, Chairman. I was going to say this application should be refused due to the environmental impact and the negative impact on the local residents.
Okay, thank you. And Councillor Chapman-Allen? Sorry, you're on mute, please. Councillor Chapman-Allen, you're on mute.
Sorry, I would say that the opportunity for local consultation or lack of local consultation, whichever our solicitor thinks will be correct.
No, I'll take Mike Horn first and then Rebecca, please. Mike.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Of all of those, I think that the only one that is a potentially defendable reason for refusal is the effect on the amenity of local residents. That is a subjective matter that you have listened to and very carefully considered. And in your view, and you are perfectly entitled to have this view, you subjectively are of a different opinion to that of your officers. I do not consider that we have any technical evidence that could possibly go against the environmental technical evidence that we've had. But I think that that one single reason for refusing is defendable.
Thank you. Councillor Attwell, then Councillor Gilbert.
Yeah, I hear what Mr. Horn has said, but I do think our policy ENV02 comes in here, and I don't think that there has been sufficient technical evidence on the environment. I think I've demonstrated that. All we've had is a somebody going down to site and taking a look around a field. We've not had any active studies carried out on the effects of the environment. So I think probably ENV02 does come into play. And I do think as the local planning authority, as Natural England have advised, it is for us to determine if we think that, it's for us to determine that the environment is protected. So I don't think we've done that. I think I've talked about that at length, and I think ENV02 is defensible in that regard as well. But I would ask Mike's opinion on that.
I'll take Councillor Gilbert first, and then I'll allow Mr. Horn to come back. Councillor Gilbert.
Yeah, thank you, Chairman. Is there anything in there that we could refuse included on that, the possible conflict with the airfield and the approach for landing? Because I used to go flying with a friend of mine.
No, we don't have that.
I had that coming up in front of me. I wanted to move.
Yeah. Thank you, Councillor Gilbert. Mr. Horn.
No, we don't have any technical evidence to back that up. And likewise, I do take very careful notice of what Councillor Attwell has just said. But the reason why there are mental impacts of this is because our technical advice said that that was all that was required. My legal opinion is that the one reason for refusal, i.e. the amenity of local residents, is lawful, defendable. But of course, at the end of the day, you have voted to refuse this, and it is for you, if you wish to include the reasons that you want to, regardless of the warnings that I'm giving.
Councillor Attewell.
Yeah, I appreciate Mike's input as always. I would say yes, definitely impact on the local community, but then I don't see any reason why we can't say that we've got concerns about the environment as well. As you've just said, it is for us to determine. I mean, we've had instances in the past at this committee where the Highways Department at County Hall have said something is suitable, and we've said no, in our opinion, using common sense, we don't think it is, and we've refused on that basis. So I would say that I see no reason why we couldn't put in the second item to say that we think there's a negative impact on the environment. And the environment covers many things, doesn't it? Not just the wildlife, but it also covers the environment for people who live around it.
Okay, thank you. We'll take that further, I think. Could I just ask, I'll get Mr. Horn there, would you like the vote taken again to just confirm, following on from the fact that we had a refusal from members, or are you satisfied that it is a refusal at 5-4?
You're asking me, Chairman, because it was definitely a 5-4.
Yes, you're quite right, Mr. Chairman. You do need now to take the opposite vote in the normal manner. So we need to do that, and then finally decide upon should the vote be 5-4 for refusal, what the reason or reasons for that refusal are.
Yeah, because we just jumped ahead of ourselves slightly there with everyone having so many questions still to be answered and reasons for going against it. So you've actually given your reasons now. So what I need off members, we need another roll call that the recommendation now from the floor, not from your officers, but the recommendation from the floor is one of refusal. So Julie, could you take just one more roll call, please, with the recommendation being one of refusal?
Thank you, Chairman.
Just say, can I just ask you just to say refusal or approval? That way we'll know. You want to refuse the application or approve the application. Thank you.
Councillor Wilkinson.
Approve the application.
Councillor Attewell.
Refuse.
Sorry, Councillor Attewell, is that if you refuse the application or
refuse the application? Yeah.
Yeah, that's right. Oh God.
Councillor Chapman Allen.
Refuse the application.
Councillor Clark.
Refuse the application.
Councillor Crane.
Refuse the application.
Councillor Dygan.
Approve the application.
Councillor Gilbert.
Refuse the application.
Councillor Kybird.
Approve the application.
And Councillor Martin.
Approve the application.
Yep. Okay, that's fine. We've got the same result. Just within our terms, that's what we have to do. So this item is refused, and we have had the reasons put forward, and I'm sure the solicitor is happy with those reasons. And the other items that Councillor Attewell was raising, we'll see from a further inquiries within that. Can I have Rebecca Collins, please? Sorry, Councillor Attewell, just one sec.
For the purpose of the recording, that's 2 reasons for refusal: the amenity and the impact on biodiversity.
Yeah. Okay. You happy with that, members? Okay, thanks very much. This item is moved on. Thank you. Thanks for all those that attended here. We move on now. We've lost some of our other items on 9, so we'll move on to item. Sorry, someone's having a telephone conversation. Oh, it's Marion with her microphone still on. Marion, we know your dating site. We're following you. Okay, thank you. So item 10 is applications determined by the Executive Director of Place. These are there for your information. At that point now, we close the meeting so we can stop the recording. And I'd ask all members just to stay so we can wash up.